I want to thank you for joining me again as we continue on with our series, From Other to One Another, our daily devotional series that accompanying our Sunday morning sermon series. I want to thank you for joining us for that as we explore the richness of our relationships with one another. I've received calls in the church office occasionally from somebody who calls and says, "Will your church, is it okay if somebody who is homosexual or somebody who's lesbian or somebody who's been released from prison or somebody who's been divorced comes and worships at your church?" Really, the question isn't whether or not they can come and worship in our church. They're not wondering if I can come up and take some space and sing some songs and listen to the message. Really, what their question is if I come with this baggage that I have, will I be welcome? Will I be accepted? Paul tells the Romans in the context again where the Jews and the Gentiles are bickering with one another for who's going to be in control of the church, who's going to create the standards, who's going to be the measure of what's right and wrong and what's acceptable and not. He tells them to accept one another just as Christ has welcomed you, or welcome one another just as Christ has welcomed you to the glory of God. Now, that welcome that he's referring to is not just a welcome that says, "Hi, how you doing? Let me shake your hand. Let me give you a high five or a fist bump or whatever." Just it's not that. It's not the polite, "Hi, how you doing? Nice to have you here." The welcome that he is referring to, some translations translate that accept. The idea there with welcome is an idea of inclusion. That I take you and I include you. You see, in the context of the church, it's the issue of welcoming you into the family. I've known of families that when there is a marriage in the family, there are families where the person who has married into never feels welcome, always is treated as if they are an outsider, as if they don't belong. I know of other families, and it makes a tremendous amount of difference that once they have gotten married, they are part of the family. They are warmly embraced. They are accepted. They are treated as if they belong, just as if they had been born into the family. They are part of it. Thinking in those terms, that's what Paul's talking about, inclusion. What are the walls that we build of one another that exclude one another? I mean, some of them are decisions that we make or positions that we hold and politics that we have, some beliefs that we have. Some of them are issues of language and color and athletics and body builds and expectations like that. And we have often taken and excluded somebody thinking that this person doesn't measure up because of this measure that I'm using to gauge their value. Paul is telling us to accept one another. The extent of that acceptance, that extent of that welcome, is gauged by the phrase, "as Christ has accepted," or "as Christ has welcomed you." Think about that. How did Christ welcome you? Did Christ say to you that you've got to fix all of the problems? You've got to cover all of the sins. You've got to redeem everything that's wrong with you before I will accept you into the family. No. Earlier in Romans it tells us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us and accepted us into the family and welcomed us into the family. He gave up himself for us while we were still sinners. And we ought to accept each other the same way.